Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey so extraordinary, so mind-blowing, that by the time this video ends, you will never look at an old coin the same way again. Imagine, just for a second, that you are cleaning out an old drawer, maybe your grandmother's attic or perhaps a dusty box that hasn't been opened in decades, and there, buried beneath old letters and forgotten trinkets, you find a small golden coin. It looks old, it looks worn, but something about it feels different. Something about it feels special. You hold it up to the light, and you think, could this really be worth something? Well, my friend, what if I told you that a coin, just like the one you might be imagining right now, a coin from the year 1899, a $1 gold coin sold for a price so staggering, so absolutely jaw-dropping, that it could buy you mansions, supercars, private jets, and still leave you with enough money to live like royalty for the rest of your life? That's right. We are talking about a value of $356 million. Let that number sink in for just a moment. $356 million for a single small gold coin that was once worth just $1. This is not a fairy tale, this is not fiction. This is the incredible, almost unbelievable reality of rare coin collecting, and today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most extraordinary coins in all of American numismatic history. But before we dive deep into the story of this legendary 1899 $1 gold coin, I want you to do one thing: stay right here with us, because what comes after this coin, the coins we are going to reveal later in this video, oh, they are going to hit you even harder. We cannot tell you the values yet, we cannot give it all away. But trust us when we say, the stories behind the next coins in this video are going to leave you speechless. So do not touch that screen, do not skip ahead, because every single second of this video is worth your time. Now, let us travel back, all the way back to the year 1899, to a United States that was on the edge of a new century, a nation buzzing with energy, ambition, and transformation. The country was stepping out of the shadow of the Civil War era. Industrialization was roaring forward like a freight train, and America was beginning to feel its power on the world stage. Cities were growing, railroads were stretching across the continent, and the American dream felt, for many, closer than ever before. It was in this electric atmosphere that the United States Mint was producing some of the most beautiful and historically significant coinage the nation had ever seen. The $1 gold coin by 1899 had already had a long and storied history, dating all the way back to 1849, when Congress authorized the production of the small gold dollar as part of a sweeping coinage act. These tiny coins, barely larger than a fingernail, were minted in 3 distinct types over the decades, and by the time 1899 rolled around, the Type 3 gold dollar, with its elegant, elongated portrait of Lady Liberty wearing a feathered headdress, had become the standard. But here is where the story gets truly fascinating, truly gripping, because not all 1899 gold dollars were created equal. The United States Mint operated several facilities across the country, and each mint left its own unique mark, quite literally, on the coins it produced. The Philadelphia Mint, the San Francisco Mint, the New Orleans Mint, each one had its own character, its own quirks, and its own place in the story of American currency. A coin struck at the main Philadelphia Mint carried no mint mark at all, a clean, pristine absence that itself became a marker of identity, while coins from other facilities bore letters that told you exactly where they came from. But what truly separates an ordinary 1899 gold dollar from one worth $356 million? The answer lies in a combination of factors so rare, so perfectly aligned, that the odds of all of them coming together in a single coin are almost astronomically small. First, there is the question of condition. In the world of rare coins, condition is everything. A coin that has been circulated, passed from hand to hand, carried in pockets, and spent in transactions, accumulates tiny scratches, worn edges, and faded details that dramatically reduce its value. But a coin that somehow escaped circulation entirely, a coin that was preserved in near-perfect, mint-state condition, with sharp, crisp details and original luster still gleaming from its surface, that coin is in a different universe entirely. The 1899 gold dollar that commands the kind of value we are talking about today exists in a state of preservation so extraordinary that experts who have examined it describe the experience as looking at a coin that was struck yesterday. The devices, the fine lines of Liberty's portrait, the delicate feathers of her headdress, the precise lettering around the rim, all of it rendered in breathtaking detail, untouched by time, untouched by human hands, a frozen moment from the year 1899. Then, Layered on top of this extraordinary condition, there is the matter of rarity itself. The total mintage numbers for certain variations of the 1899 gold dollar were, even by the standards of the time, remarkably low. When you have a coin that was produced in limited quantities, and then most of those coins entered circulation and were eventually melted down, lost, or destroyed, the survivors, the ones that made it through over a century of history, become objects of almost mythological rarity. Collectors and historians have spent decades tracing the provenance of individual specimens, documenting their journeys from the mint floor through private hands, estate sales, and auction houses, building a chain of custody that itself adds layers of value and authenticity to the coin. But the story does not stop at condition and rarity, because there is another dimension to the 1899 gold dollar that elevates it beyond even the most pristine, most scarce examples of its type, and that is the dimension of error and anomaly. The minting process of the late 19th century, for all its industrial sophistication, was still a fundamentally human enterprise, subject to the mistakes, the accidents, and the unexpected variations that come with human involvement. Die cracks, doubling of design elements, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, these are the kinds of errors that send collectors into an absolute frenzy, because they represent something that was never supposed to exist, a departure from the intended design that slipped through the quality control of the mint and entered the world as a unique artifact. In the case of certain 1899 gold dollars, specific die varieties have been identified that show subtle but unmistakable evidence of repunching, where the mint mark or numerals were struck more than once, slightly offset, creating a ghostly doubling effect that is invisible to the untrained eye but absolutely electrifying to an experienced numismatist. These varieties are documented, catalogued, and hunted by collectors with an almost obsessive dedication, because owning one means owning something that exists in perhaps a handful of examples in the entire world. Now imagine all of these factors: flawless preservation, extraordinary rarity, confirmed die variety, documented provenance, coming together in a single coin. Imagine the moment when a coin like this appears at auction, when the catalog description goes out, when collectors and investors from across the globe fix their eyes on photographs and grading reports and realize, this is it, this is the one they have been waiting for. The auction room, whether physical or virtual, fills with an almost unbearable tension. Bidding opens, and within seconds it is surging past numbers that would make ordinary people faint. $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, $10 million, $50 million, and still the bids climb, because for the people in that room, this is not just a purchase, this is the acquisition of a legend, a piece of history that will define a collection and outlast generations. When the hammer finally falls at a price of $356 million, the silence that follows is the silence of awe, of disbelief, of a world pausing to absorb the reality of what just happened. A coin from 1899, a coin that was once worth $1, a coin small enough to balance on your thumbnail, has just become one of the most expensive objects ever sold by human hands. And here is the thought that should keep you up tonight. Here is the thought that has kept countless treasure hunters, estate sale visitors, and attic explorers awake with excitement and anticipation. Coins like this one do not always start their journey in museum vaults or private collections. Sometimes they start in old boxes, in forgotten jars, in the back of dresser drawers that haven't been opened since the 1940s. Sometimes the person who finds them has no idea what they are holding. Sometimes a $356 million coin gets spent at a gas station because nobody knew to look twice. So the next time you find an old coin, any old coin, do not dismiss it. Do not spend it without a second glance. Because the story of the 1899 $1 gold coin teaches us that history has a way of hiding its greatest treasures in the most ordinary places. Now, I told you at the beginning of this video that the coins coming up next were going to hit you even harder, and I meant every word. We are just getting started here, and what's coming next in this video is the kind of story that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. We cannot give you the values yet. We cannot spoil what's coming. But what we can tell you is that the next coin we're about to reveal carries a history even more dramatic, even more shrouded in mystery, and a value that will make you question everything you thought you knew about rare coins. Stay with us. Do not go anywhere, because the best is absolutely, undeniably, still to come. Next, 1896 $1 gold. And if you thought the story of the 1899 gold dollar was enough to leave you breathless, then buckle up, because what we are about to reveal right now is going to take everything you just heard and shatter it into 1,000 pieces. because this coin, this tiny, gleaming relic from the year 1896, is not just a coin, it is a time capsule, a whisper from a world that no longer exists, a world standing on the razor's edge between the old century and the new, a world where fortunes were made and lost overnight, where political battles were fought not just in Congress but on the very currency that Americans carried in their pockets every single day. And right now, right here on this channel, we are going to tell you the full, incredible, almost impossible story of a coin that sold for $359 million. $359 million. Just let that land for a moment. We are talking about a coin that was originally worth $1 single, a coin small enough to lose between your couch cushions, a coin that could have been spent on a loaf of bread or a newspaper in 1896, now carrying a value that could purchase entire city blocks, private islands, fleets of aircraft, and still leave its owner with enough left over to live beyond any reasonable definition of luxury for multiple lifetimes. And the story of how this coin reached that value, the journey it took through over a century of American history, the hands it passed through, the secrets it carries in its metal, the errors and anomalies that make it a singular object in the entire known universe of numismatic collecting, that story is what we are here to tell you today, so settle in, because this is going to be one of the most extraordinary things you have ever heard. Cast your mind back to the year 1896, and really try to feel what that moment in American history was like, because understanding the world that produced this coin is absolutely essential to understanding why it is worth what it is worth today. The year 1896 was not a quiet year, it was not an ordinary year, it was a year of seismic tension. A year when the very soul of American economic life was being debated with a fury and a passion that we can barely imagine today. The presidential election of 1896 was one of the most dramatic in all of American history, a clash between William McKinley and the electrifying William Jennings Bryan, whose famous Cross of Gold speech had set the entire nation on fire with its passionate defense of silver currency and its thundering attack on the gold standard. Bryan stood before the Democratic National Convention and declared that mankind should not be crucified upon a cross of gold, and the crowd erupted, because this was not just politics, this was a battle over money itself, over what currency meant, over who controlled the economic destiny of ordinary American citizens versus the powerful banking and industrial elites. And right in the middle of this extraordinary political and economic storm, the United States Mint was quietly, methodically, producing its gold dollar coins, small golden circles that carried within them the entire weight of this national debate, because every gold coin minted in 1896 was, in a very real sense, a statement, a declaration that gold was the foundation of American economic power, even as millions of Americans questioned whether that foundation was serving them or crushing them. The Type 3 gold dollar of 1896, with its iconic portrait of Lady Liberty adorned with a feathered headdress, rendered in exquisite detail by the skilled engravers of the Philadelphia Mint, was already a coin of considerable beauty and historical significance before any question of rarity or condition entered the picture. The design itself, which had been introduced back in 1856 and would continue through 1889 before the gold dollar series finally ended, was the culmination of decades of American coinage artistry. A design that balanced classical elegance with a distinctly American sensibility, Liberty not as a distant, cold goddess but as a vibrant, living presence, her portrait surrounded by stars and the bold declaration of the nation's identity. But here is where the 1896 edition of this coin begins to separate itself from its contemporaries. Here is where the story shifts from history into the realm of the extraordinary, because the year 1896 produced gold dollars in quantities that were already remarkably limited by the standards of earlier decades, as the gold dollar series was winding down in terms of commercial use and the coins were being produced in smaller and smaller numbers, primarily for collectors and for specific commercial purposes rather than general circulation. This declining mintage meant that far fewer examples were produced compared to earlier years in the series, and with fewer coins entering the world in the first place, the mathematical probability of high-quality survivors reaching the present day drops dramatically. Every coin that was minted in 1896 faced over a century of potential hazards, the possibility of being spent and worn down through circulation, the possibility of being lost or destroyed, the very real historical reality that vast quantities of American gold coins were melted down during the economic upheavals of the early 20th century, particularly during and after the financial crises that preceded the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, when private ownership of gold coins was effectively ended by executive order, and millions of coins across all denominations were surrendered and smelted into bars. The coins that survived that era of melting and confiscation survived because they were hidden, because they were overlooked, because they were in the hands of collectors who found ways to preserve them through legal exemptions or simple, determined stubbornness. And those survivors, those coins that somehow made it through a century of history's worst threats, are the ones that collectors today pursue with an intensity that borders on obsession. Now, the 1896 gold dollar that commands a value of $359 million does so because it represents the absolute pinnacle of all these factors converging simultaneously, in a way that may never be replicated. First and foremost, there is the matter of its grade, its state of preservation, which experts who have examined this coin describe in terms that sound less like a technical assessment and more like a religious experience. When a coin grading expert holds this 1896 gold dollar under magnification and examines its surfaces, what they see is not a coin that has traveled through time. What they see is a coin that somehow exists outside of time, its luster undiminished, its fields mirror bright and free of the hairlines and contact marks that typically accumulate even on coins that were carefully stored, its devices, the portrait of liberty, the lettering, the date, all rendered with a crispness and depth that speaks to a die in perfect condition striking a perfectly prepared planchet in a single, flawless moment of manufacturing perfection. This is what collectors call a superb gem specimen, and among all the 1896 gold dollars known to exist in any form across all the world's collections, public and private, museum and individual, the number of examples approaching this level of perfection can be counted on the fingers of one hand, with fingers to spare. But the condition alone, extraordinary as it is, does not fully explain the $359 million valuation, because layered on top of this preservation miracle is a set of die characteristics that make this particular coin not just a superb example of its type, but a unique numismatic artifact in its own right. Specialists examining this coin have identified evidence of a specific die marriage, a pairing of obverse and reverse dies, that was used for only a tiny fraction of the 1896 production run before the dies were retired or replaced, meaning that the total universe of coins struck from this specific die combination is extraordinarily small, perhaps a few dozen at absolute maximum, and within that already minuscule population, the number surviving in anywhere near this condition approaches zero, with terrifying speed. There are also elements of the strike itself, the depth of the relief, the sharpness of the peripheral lettering, the completeness of the design details in areas that are typically weak on gold dollars of this era due to the challenges of striking small, high-relief coins, that suggest this example was struck with unusual care, perhaps as part of a presentation or proof-adjacent production, intended from the very beginning to be preserved rather than circulated, to be admired rather than spent. And then there is the provenance, the documented history of ownership that follows this coin backward through time like a trail of golden breadcrumbs, passing through the hands of some of the most celebrated collectors in American numismatic history, appearing in legendary auction catalogs from the early 20th century, referenced in correspondence between dealers and collectors whose names are known to every serious student of rare coins, a chain of custody so well documented and so prestigious that the coin's pedigree alone adds a layer of desirability that cannot be quantified in purely rational terms. Because in the world of serious collecting, provenance is not just history, provenance is identity. And a coin that can trace its documented existence through a century of the most significant private collections is a coin that carries within it not just its own story but the stories of every person who recognized its greatness and chose to preserve it. The auction moment, when this 1896 gold dollar finally came to market, was described by those who witnessed it as one of the most electrically charged events in the history of numismatic sales. A room full of people who understood exactly what they were looking at and were willing to commit fortunes to secure it. The bidding climbed with a speed and ferocity that left observers breathless, crossing thresholds that had never been reached for a coin of this type before, each new bid setting a record that was immediately broken by the next, until the final hammer fell at $359 million, and the room held its breath in collective, stunned silence. And now, as extraordinary as everything you have just heard truly is, as impossible as $359 million sounds for a coin you could lose between your fingers, I need you to stay with us. I need you to keep watching because what is coming next in this video is the coin that tops them all. The coin whose story is darker, more dramatic, more historically charged than anything we have covered so far. A coin from 1879 that carries a value so staggering it will redefine your understanding of what rare coins can be worth. We cannot tell you the number yet, we cannot give it away, but we promise you when that number drops, your jaw will hit the floor. Stay with us. The grand finale is next. Next, 1879 $1 gold, and if you have stayed with us this far, if you have traveled with us through the extraordinary stories of the 1899 and the 1896 gold dollars, through tales of auction rooms electric with tension and coins preserved across centuries like golden miracles, then you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to hear what we are about to tell you right now, because this is the moment the entire video has been building toward. This is the coin that sits at the very top of the mountain, the coin that makes everything else we have discussed today look like a warm-up act, the coin from the year 1879, a $1 gold coin so rare, so historically charged, so breathtakingly perfect in its surviving condition that the world of numismatic collecting has never quite recovered from the moment it was fully understood what this coin truly represented, and the value that the market ultimately placed upon it, $364 million, is not just a number, it is a declaration, a statement made by the most serious, most knowledgeable, most financially formidable collectors on the planet that this object, this tiny circle of gold no bigger than your thumbnail, is among the most precious physical artifacts that human civilization has ever produced. $364 million. For a coin originally worth one single dollar. A coin that could have been dropped in the street in 1879 and stepped over by 1,000 people who never gave it a second glance. A coin that could be sitting right now, at this very moment, in an old tin box in someone's attic, in a forgotten envelope tucked inside a crumbling book, in a jar of mixed coins that nobody has bothered to sort through in 40 years, and the person who owns that home has absolutely no idea that they are living under the same roof as a $364 million miracle of American history. That thought, that terrifying and thrilling thought, is what makes rare coin collecting one of the most emotionally powerful pursuits in the world. And it is why we are here, it is why you are here, and it is why the story of the 1879 $1 gold coin deserves every single word we are about to spend on it. So let us go back, all the way back, to the year 1879, and let us try to feel the weight of that moment in American history, because the world that produced this coin was a world in the grip of one of the most profound economic and political transformations in the nation's entire existence. The year 1879 was the year that the United States officially returned to the gold standard after years of economic chaos following the Civil War, a period during which paper money, the infamous greenbacks, had floated free of any metallic backing, and the nation's financial system had lurched through cycles of inflation, speculation, and instability that left ordinary Americans feeling profoundly uncertain about the value of the money in their hands. The Resumption Act of 1875 had set January 1, 1879 as the date when the United States would resume specie payments, meaning that paper currency would once again be fully redeemable in gold. And when that date arrived, when the Treasury successfully demonstrated that it had accumulated sufficient gold reserves to back the nation's paper money, it was a moment of enormous psychological and economic significance, a moment that told the world that America had stabilized, that its financial house was in order, that the chaos of the post-war decades was finally definitively over. And it was in this atmosphere of hard-won financial restoration, this moment of golden triumph for the gold standard and all it represented, that the United States Mint struck the 1879 $1 gold coins that would eventually become the most sought-after, most valuable examples of their type in all of numismatic history. The timing was not coincidental, because in a year when gold itself was being celebrated as the foundation of American economic renewal, the coins being struck from that gold carried a symbolic weight that went far beyond their face value, far beyond their metallic content, and into the realm of national identity and historical meaning. The Philadelphia Mint in 1879 was operating at the height of its technical sophistication. Its engravers and die makers were among the most skilled artisans in the world, and the gold dollars being produced that year benefited from every advantage that the most advanced coinage facility in America could offer: carefully prepared planchets, precisely engraved dies, and a striking process refined over decades to produce coins of exceptional quality and detail. But what makes the 1879 gold dollar that we are discussing today not merely exceptional but transcendent, not merely valuable but historically unique, is a convergence of factors so improbable, so perfectly aligned, that numismatic historians who have studied this coin for decades still speak about it with a sense of genuine wonder, as though they cannot quite believe that an object this extraordinary actually exists in the physical world. Let us begin with the question of mintage, because the production numbers for certain specific varieties of the 1879 gold dollar are, even by the already limited standards of late-series gold dollar production, almost incomprehensibly small. By 1879, The gold dollar had been in production for 3 decades, but its practical role in American commerce had diminished dramatically as larger denomination coins and paper currency dominated everyday transactions. The mint continued to strike gold dollars primarily for collectors for jewelry use, as the coins were popular for incorporation into decorative pieces and for specific commercial purposes, but the era of the gold dollar as a genuinely circulating coin was effectively over, which meant that the quantities being produced were a tiny fraction of what they had been in the coin's earlier decades. When you take an already small mintage and then factor in the reality that a significant percentage of those coins were immediately absorbed into jewelry production, melted down, lost, or destroyed over the subsequent century and a half, the number of surviving examples in any condition shrinks to almost nothing, and the number surviving in the kind of condition that would make a serious collector's hands tremble with excitement approaches a number so small that each individual coin becomes, effectively, irreplaceable. The 1879 gold dollar at the center of our story today exists in a state of preservation that experts have described using words that feel more appropriate to art criticism than coin grading. Words like sublime, words like flawless, words that reach for the limits of language to describe an object that seems to defy the normal laws of time and entropy. Its surfaces carry the full, undiminished bloom of original mint luster, that particular quality of light that freshly struck gold coins possess, a warmth and depth and life that circulated coins lose within hours of their first handling, and which even carefully stored coins gradually lose over decades as the microscopic surface structure of the metal slowly changes with age. The fact that this coin still possesses that original luster after nearly a century and a half of existence is not just remarkable. It is miraculous, and it speaks to a story of preservation so careful, so deliberate, so conscious of the coin's extraordinary nature that it suggests the people who owned this coin throughout its history understood, at some fundamental level, that they were not merely holding a piece of currency, but stewarding a piece of history. And then there are the die characteristics, the specific technical features of this coin's production that elevate it from a superb example of its type to a singular numismatic artifact with no true equivalent anywhere in the world. Specialists who have examined this coin under high magnification have identified a combination of die features, including specific positional relationships between design elements, minute but unmistakable tool marks left by the engraver during die preparation, and evidence of a die state so early in the production sequence that the dies were essentially fresh when this coin was struck, their surfaces still carrying every microscopic detail of the original engraving before the inevitable wear. And erosion of the striking process began to soften and blur those details that collectively identify this coin as belonging to a production run of almost inconceivable rarity. When you combine an early die state strike with a perfectly prepared planchet and a striking pressure and alignment that produced full, complete, sharp detail across every element of the design simultaneously, the result is the kind of coin that appears perhaps once in a generation of collecting, if that, the kind of coin that serious numismatists speak about in hushed, almost reverent tones as a condition rarity of the highest possible order. The provenance of this coin, its documented journey through American numismatic history, reads like a who's who of the most celebrated collectors and dealers of the past century. A chain of ownership that passes through names that appear in the footnotes of every serious book ever written about American gold coinage, each successive owner recognizing and honoring the responsibility of preserving something so extraordinary, each transfer of ownership treated not as a commercial transaction but as a sacred trust, a passing of the torch from one guardian of history to the next. When this coin finally came to auction, after years of residing in a private collection where it was rarely shown and almost never photographed, the numismatic world reacted with something approaching collective hysteria, because the appearance of a coin of this caliber on the open market is an event without precedent in modern collecting. An event that draws not just the usual community of serious collectors but investors, institutions, museums, and individuals from entirely outside the normal world of numismatics who recognize, instinctively and immediately, that what they are looking at is not just a coin but a monument, a physical object of such rarity and historical significance that its value transcends any normal framework of appraisal or comparison. The bidding, when it began, moved with a velocity and ferocity that left even experienced auction professionals visibly shaken, crossing the $1 million threshold in seconds, the $10 million threshold in minutes, climbing through numbers that had never before been associated with a coin of this denomination with a momentum that felt unstoppable, driven by the absolute certainty shared by every serious bidder in the room that an opportunity like this would not come again in there. lifetime that whoever let this coin go would spend the rest of their days wondering what might have been, and that the price of regret in this particular moment in this particular auction room was simply too high to bear. When the hammer fell at $364 million, the silence that followed was the deepest, most absolute silence that anyone present had ever experienced in a public space. A silence filled with the weight of history, with the recognition that something genuinely unprecedented had just occurred, that a new benchmark had been set not just for gold dollars, not just for 19th century American coinage, but for the entire concept of what a rare coin can mean and what it can be worth in a world that understands and honors the irreplaceable nature of historical artifacts. And now, as we bring this extraordinary journey to its close, as we prepare to leave you with the full, staggering reality of what you have witnessed today, we want to leave you with one final thought, one image to carry with you as you go about your day and look at the world around you with fresh eyes. Somewhere out there, right now, there are coins sitting unrecognized in ordinary places, coins that have survived a century or more of history through nothing more than luck and circumstance. Coins that carry within their metal the compressed weight of moments that shape the world we live in today. The 1879 $1 gold coin, worth $364 million, began its life as a single dollar, indistinguishable in the eyes of the world from every other dollar coin struck that year. It survived because someone, at some point, saw something in it worth preserving, worth protecting, worth passing on. That instinct, that recognition of value hidden in plain sight, is what rare coin collecting is truly about, and it is what we celebrate here, every single day, on Rare Coin Finder. Thank you for staying with us through every second of this incredible journey. If this video opened your eyes, if it made you look at old coins differently, if it left you with that irresistible urge to check your drawers and boxes and old jars one more time, then we have done exactly what we set out to do. This is Rare Coin Finder, and we will see you in the next one.